Good morning, everyone. Would like to get this meeting, call this meeting to order. Would like to welcome everyone here in Carson City, as well as anyone in Las Vegas watching, or anyone that is watching online through Nellis or our legislative YouTube channel. With that, Secretary, please take the roll.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Here. Assemblywoman Cohen. Here. Assemblywoman Considine. Present. Assemblywoman Gallant. Present. Assemblyman Gray. Assemblywoman Hanson. Here. Assemblywoman Hardy. Here. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. Here. Assemblywoman Marzola. Here. Assemblywoman Mosca. Here. Assemblywoman Newby. Here. Assemblyman Ortlicker. Here. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Present. Assemblyman Urick. Here. Chair Miller.
Here. And please mark the other, I think just Assemblyman Gray, present when he arrives. With that, we will go ahead and get started. Today on the agenda, we have 3 bills that we're going to hear. The first 2 will come from Attorney General Ford's office. So I would like to open the hearing to AB 48, which is a measure that revises provisions relating to the privilege of communication between a victim of certain crimes and a victim's advocate. So please approach. And give you a second to settle in, and Attorney General, when you're ready, please proceed. We lower those chairs for you just right before you come in every morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Great to be back before the Assembly Judiciary Committee, and great to see you all again. I am Aaron Ford, your Attorney General, here today to introduce Assembly Bill 48, a bill that my office is supporting on behalf of the domestic violence advocate community. Domestic violence, also known as intimate partner violence, is a serious and widespread problem. In the United States, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience contact with sexual violence, physical violence, or a issue of stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime, and report negative impacts such as injury, fear, concern for safety, and needing services, and that's from the CDC's 2017 report. The domestic violence we're talking about can happen to anyone, regardless of employment or educational level, regardless of race or ethnicity, of religion, marital status, physical ability, age, sex, gender identity, or sexual orientation. However, the burden of domestic violence is not shared equally across all groups, with women and many racial and ethnic and sexual minority groups being disproportionately affected. Domestic violence not only affects those who are abused, but it has a substantial effect on family members, on friends, on co-workers and witnesses, and on the community at large. Children who grow up witnessing domestic violence are among those who are seriously affected by this crime. Frequent exposure to violence in the home not only predisposes children to numerous social and physical problems, but it also teaches them that violence is a normal way of life, therefore increasing their risk of becoming society's next generation of victims and abusers. And we get that information from the National Domestic Violence Hotline. The Committee on Domestic Violence is housed in my office, in the Office of Attorney General, and I have the pleasure of serving as the chair. Membership is composed of experienced individuals from various geographic regions throughout our state. Currently, the committee maintains members representing law enforcement, the judiciary, prosecution, victims services, healthcare, education, and domestic violence survivors. On August 25th of 2022, the Committee on Domestic Violence, we began conversations to establish a minimum standard, a minimum set of required training hours in order to become a certified victims advocate. The committee then voted to submit language for a BDR. Over the past 6 months, the committee has met several times. We've deliberated and we've held workshops on this language. And on February the 17th, a few weeks ago, this committee, our committee, voted to support the amended version that will be presented to this committee today. And with that, I'd like to hand the hearing over to Serena Evans, who is the Policy Director for the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence, to talk further about the bill. Serena.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Serena Evans. I'm the Policy Director for the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. First, I want to thank you all for allowing me to present today, and thank you to Attorney General Ford and his exceptional staff for bringing this bill forward and for their commitment to perfecting it. This bill originated, like the Attorney General said, in the Committee on Domestic Violence. Upon its introduction, the Attorney General, Chief of Staff Teresa Benitez Thompson, and Victim Ombudsman Nicole Riley committed to working with us, urban and rural service providers, and other stakeholders statewide to find language that would accommodate each program's needs while meeting its original intent. The proposed amendment that is in front of you today is a true reflection of statewide collaboration and advocacy. The bill started with a simple idea: to bring Nevada advocates up to the national standard and to professionalize victim advocacy. Being a victim advocate takes compassion, empathy, understanding, and patience. It truly takes extraordinary people to be advocates, and our communities could not thrive without them. So often, though, victim advocates do not receive the recognition they deserve, and others tend to dismiss the professionalism of advocacy. Victim advocates see their clients and victim survivors through some of their absolute worst days, and they do so with grace. Victim survivors often find great comfort and solace in working with an advocate and having someone they can confidentially confide in when it feels like the rest of their lives are crumbling. Advocates are pillars of stability and support. They are able to serve as such because they have privilege. Because victim survivors may divulge some aspects of the most intimate parts of their lives, it is imperative that advocates can offer a safe and confidential place for them to be vulnerable. This bill puts into statute which training topics must be covered through a mandatory 20-hour advocate training process. The intent behind naming the topics is to have consistency across all direct service providers on the basics of advocacy and to professionalize the career. We have heard from numerous programs statewide that when their advocates are subpoenaed to court, they are often questioned about what training or certifications they have that allows them to claim privilege. We hope that by defining the trainings into statute, that it becomes clear why advocates can claim privilege confidentiality. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you for your presentation.
Madam Chair, we'd like to walk you through the amendment, and Teresa Benitez Thompson will do that, if that's okay.
Yes, please, and then we'll go ahead with questions.
Thank you so much. For the record, Teresa Benitez Thompson, Chief of Staff to Attorney General Ford. So walking you through the amendment that's submitted.
Chief, do we have the amendment?
Yes, it was submitted and we've got copies.
Is it on Nellis? It's
I think
not.
we sent
When
it in
wa-
last
was?
last Friday.
Okay, can we have some paper copies? Can we just
Okay.
wait a minute and then?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have paper copies? Do we have some already printed? I think everyone has it. Please proceed.
I appreciate that. The good Teresa Benitez Thompson, for the record, Chief of Staff to Attorney General Ford. The good news is the amendment's making it a simpler bill, not a more complicated bill. So as we walk through this, you'll see that the gist of it hopefully is easy to capture in plain. So if you go to Section 1, in the original version of the bill, we'd contemplated 40 hours of instruction, and the amendment you'll see is at least 20 cumulative hours of instruction. And that came from lots of conversation around capacity for the different service organizations, considering their staffing. This was the level that everyone was most comfortable with. Next, you're going to see that under relevant trainings, number 4, best practices related to media, we are taking that out. In the 20 hours that we're contemplating, we really think that the ethics, the civics, and criminal law related to domestic violence, other relevant laws, trauma-informed care, that those and any other topics that might fit into that, we're going to be the best, and we're looking to remove the best practices regarding media. As well, you're going to see that the bottom language on section 6, lines 14 through 17, we are taking out. The reason being, once again, just in consideration through all of the different service organizations, their ability to be able to be in compliance with the law on day one, and their capacity is there. Then as you move through to section 2, you're going to see that we section 2 is pretty much the same, actually. There's no conforming changes or anything there. So the changes are coming in section 1, 20 hours of at minimum cumulative training in these topic areas is what's being proposed. I believe we're open for questions.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. And we appreciate this concise amendment. But of course, I understand that both of you know how to write amendments for the legislature. So with that, we're open for questions. Our first question is from Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the question. I have a question about the training and so these are very sophisticated topics that the training is going to be, is going to cover. Who's doing the training? What training is the trainer going to have? How do we know? You're also touching on legal issues, so how do we know that this is proper training?
Serena Evans, for the record, Chair, through you to Assemblywoman Cohen. Thank you so much.
Please go direct.
Thank you so much. Assemblywoman Cohen, thank you so much for the question. So right now, the trainings are done at each program, the advocacy programs, as well as us, the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence offers a virtual training. And so these trainings are typically done by advocates and executive directors, program directors, things like that, who have been in the field for many, many years. They are developed by each individual program to meet the needs of their community, as well as hitting each of these topics. And so many of the discussions that we had with the programs statewide, as well as with the Attorney General's office, is that this bill that's being introduced today is the start of a process of professionalizing victim advocacy. And so there is hopes over, the coming years, the coming sessions, to have a certifying agency that looks at these trainings, makes sure that they are hitting all these competencies. But right now, because of capacity, resources, and funding, that's just not realistic. But we, as the statewide coalition, do help programs develop these trainings. We're here as a resource. We have numerous amounts of resources to national networks, national databases, best practices, things like that.
Aaron Ford, if I could augment that. I don't want to speak on behalf of the advocacy community, and so please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I want to be clear, these things are happening hit or miss in certain places under certain advocacy organizations already. So, for example, the civil and criminal laws related to domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking, they're spoken about through Serena's agency, for example. So what we're trying to do through this bill is to standardize a core group of items that need to be discussed at all training capacity, in all training arenas, so that we can have the professionalization of victims advocacy, and then again, a minimum number of 20 hours of cumulative work in these particular areas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for that presentation. I am concerned about two things. One, that you are removing the media portion of it, and two, that the training doesn't have to be supervised by someone with 1 year of experience. So my concern is, if you're taking out the media portion, does that mean that you are prohibiting the advocate from speaking to the media so that that is no longer necessary to have that in there? Because I think that that's important, and I think that the media has a way of finding people or approaching people, and they need to be prepared for that. And if you're going to take it out, I think that that should also come with the precursor that they don't speak to the media, so that they don't inadvertently mess up. And the second thing is, I'd like to know why you took out the 1-year requirement, because I think that time in place and understanding the process helps a trainer be a better trainer. And I would be concerned if someone who just came into your agency a couple months ago, had some training, and is now training other people and doesn't have any depth of experience. So if you could please address that.
Serena Evans for the record. Thank you so much, Assemblywoman, for those concerns and those questions. So first, relating to the media best practices, we had robust conversations about this, and typically what happens, especially in larger agencies, so think Washoe County, Clark County, most advocacy organizations have a designated communications person who is specifically trained in speaking to the media. Most requests for media that come through either are directed to the executive director or said communications person. In our smaller rural agencies, we really wanted to make sure that because this training is a minimum, so we just want to make sure that the basics are met. We are not saying that advocates cannot have training on media. We just didn't feel that that was needed in this group of core topics that needed to be covered in terms of providing the best care of victim advocacy to survivors. And so again, we at the coalition offer a media training, and so it can be an additional training that programs go through, but to really make sure that advocates are being trained on ethics and best practices and trauma-informed care. That is what makes an advocate an advocate. Media training it's needed, but it's not one of those core training topics, as well as best practices relating to media is also, you can make the argument, covered under ethics, because when we speak about ethics and confidentiality, you cannot give the name of the victim advocate or the victim survivor that you are working with. You cannot disclose intimate details about, the case. And so that really is covered under ethics, was our reasoning behind that. To answer the second part of your question, relating to the training must be supervised by a victim advocate who has at least 1 year of experience. This was specifically taken out for our rural agencies. Right now, as I'm sure many of you are aware, there are staffing issues across the board in all professions, and our small rural agencies are really seeing the hit with victim advocates. To be honest, victim advocates don't make a whole lot of money, and so sometimes, especially in our rural communities, they don't stay there for long periods of time. And so, most of our training is done by individuals who have been there for many, 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 many years. But to protect our smaller rural programs, we wanted to ensure that they wouldn't be non-compliant with the law that we were putting forward. So it is best practice that we, have someone that has been there for hopefully more than a year doing this training, but we didn't want to create something in statute that would create negative consequences for our programs.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for this presentation. Kind of coming right off of the few things that you just said, I just wanted to make sure, because I know advocates in this space don't get paid a lot. When does this training happen? Are there any costs to the advocate? And also, since it looks like what you're trying to do is build a basis for some standardization, if an advocate works for one entity and then moves across the state or goes to another entity, is this training count, or will they need to go through this training at each individual entity until some future standardization occurs?
Serena Evans for the record. Thank you so much for that question. So this training is usually right off the bat. You get hired, you have to go through this. You cannot work with victim survivors. You cannot be on the call lines, anything like that until this training is complete. As for, is it transferable? That is kind of at the discretion of each program. So for instance, advocates to end domestic violence here in Carson City, they have their own training that they have all staff and volunteers go through. I know in Clark County, Safe Nest, Safe House, they each have their own training, so they might have you redo parts of it. I think it's kind of at the discretion of the training, or the program, my apologies. So once you have this training, you are a victim advocate, you can claim privilege, but each program might have you go through different aspects of their training just based on the needs of their community and the program itself.
Thank you. Can I just ask about the cost?
Please.
I just didn't
Yeah.
have the answer on that.
Serena Evans for the record. My apologies. There is no cost. So the coalition offers it for all our program members free of charge, as well as all programs that I'm aware of. It's, it's your onboarding essentially. So thank you.
So to follow up on the Assemblywoman's question, that means all providers, excuse me, it will be without cost for, that all providers will deliver without cost to everyone seeking this training?
Serena Evans for the record, correct.
Okay, thank you. Assemblyman Ornlicker has a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill. I have a question about Section 3, subsection 1, and the additional language about the domestic violence, sexual assault, et cetera, organizations. So I would have thought those would have fit under the existing language for nonprofit programs. So is the goal to allow for for-profit organizations that provide these services, or why the additional language?
Serena Evans for the record. The intent behind that, so you are correct that majority of those organizations defined would fall under nonprofit. I think it was just to further define the services that victim advocates in this space, so domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. We don't see a lot of for-profit organizations offering this, as well as system-based advocates do not qualify for this privilege because their intent is to support the system that they are working for. So I think defining that of domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking service organizations was also in part to help with the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. We are not a direct service provider. What we do is we serve program members across the state. So I think it was just to clarify and make sure that everyone in this movement is encompassed under this language.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. So as somebody who's done extensive work in domestic violence and a former board member of Safe House, I can attest that the nonprofit organizations and everybody that works there don't do it for the money. They do it with heart forward, and the training and the statistics and the research behind everything they provide is just phenomenal. However, I'm curious with these new standards, how there's going to be quality control, that we ensure that they're still meeting these benchmarks as it goes on, but also ensuring that it's not kind of like too much where it ends up costing more for them to continue these programs, and then it's sort of cost prohibited.
Thank you so much for the question, Teresa Benitez Thompson, Chief of Staff to Attorney General Ford. Assemblywoman Gallant, I think that's a really good question, and for the past couple of conversations that the committee has had, it's been around exactly that, around the goal of professionalization and how much can we do now. The committee is going to continue conversations about what next steps are. There were really hearty conversations around to Assemblywoman Summer Armstrong's point around supervision and what would that look like and what would it take for all of us to get there, and then what type of training will this look like. And we, in our minds, we created kind of a mini university before we realized, well, we can't legislate that upon ourselves because we're not ready to do that come October 1, 2023. So this is an ongoing project. It's a professionalization of a group that has typically been working with a lot of heart and soul, but otherwise not greatly defined. And so that is the goal, to work through and to do it in ways that are reasonable and keeps all organizations functional in compliance with the law while moving everyone along.
Thank you for that. Our next question is from Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this issue today. So my question echoes many of my colleagues about the standardization and how we ensure that ethics in one county and with one organization means ethics in the same one. So my question is, are these programs accredited? Are they, do they have to go through a process to get approved? Do they provide credentials? What measures are there in place to make sure that it is at least marginally standardized?
Serena Evans for the record. So building off of what Teresa Benitez Thompson just said, this is going to be a slow process of professionalizing this. And the intent right now is that there isn't funding to have a accreditation program. There are national networks, so the National Organization of Victim Assistance, also known as NOVA, does accreditation of victim advocate training. The coalition has just recently applied to have our trainings certified through NOVA. I know a few other programs throughout the state, I believe Safe Nest, and I know Safe Nest for sure, so I will leave it at that. I think a few others have applied for this as well. So there are national ones. In those conversations that we have been having with rural and urban programs statewide, we've been talking about what does this look like in the future, and there has been discussion about the coalition maybe becoming a certifying agency. Many of our program members already do go through our basic 20-hour training. So we have a 20-hour for domestic violence as well as 20 hours for sexual assault, so 40 hours cumulative there. So many of those programs utilize our basic training and then have other trainings that build upon that. So I can speak specifically for the coalition's training, as it will be, the certification process is kind of long and lengthy, but eventually will be certified through this national accreditation program. So.
And Aaron Ford for the record, I just want to add to what has been said here about both my Chief of Staff and Serena here. It responds to both Assemblywoman Gallant's question and yours, Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. And this is about quality control. This is about standardization. Right now, we don't have it. It's different in different parts of the state, different parts of the arena. And serving as chair of the Committee on Domestic Violence, I hear about the different training techniques and practices, and some meet a particular standard, some don't. And so this is a first step effort at getting to a quality control that everyone can be comfortable with, and also a standardization and understanding that ethics in rural Nevada is the same as ethics in frontier Nevada and elsewhere. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Next question from Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy birthday, in case the rest of the group didn't know. Thank you for being here, and Attorney General Ford, thank you for your last answer, because that was part of one of my questions. So also, are we concerned, a beautiful amendment. I just like, those can be tricky, and this is so readable, so thank you. Can you tell my brain is all over today? Are we concerned that, and I appreciate that we have to have consistency, best practices, all of that, and that you did amend it from 40 hours to 20. Are we concerned that we will have any problem with maybe having applicants not be as likely to want to sign up with the hours? What were the hours before? Because we're at 20, we had proposed 40. Thank you.
Serena Evans for the record. So the hours were 20 hours before. And so it was bumped up to 40, and then we had to have the hard conversation of our programs aren't ready for that. So many of our programs do way more than 20 hours. I know some programs have upwards of 90 hours of training before they allow you to work directly with victim survivors. But this was specifically geared for our rural communities who just aren't there yet, and we don't want to create laws with unintended consequences. So the goal is to eventually get to 40 hours. But we have a lot of work as a state, as a coalition, to make sure that our programs have the capacity before we statutorily mandate that.
Thank you for clearing that up. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that, Assemblywoman. I'm at the same place where I feel many members are, and I appreciate your last response, Attorney General, about that did clarify some of it, but it's still the inconsistency of the training, 20 hours to 90 hours, and currently under law, these victim advocates already have the right to privilege. So the bill isn't necessary for that. Currently, we're requiring a minimum of 20 hours, so the bill isn't necessary for that. I guess my questions come from, once the state gets, and we don't need a bill to get the NOVA certification, once we do, will that be the standard required accepted training that will be delivered and received? Because again, we're trying to get to consistency. So 20 hours, 90 hours, everyone should be receiving. If everyone walking into the courts or assisting victims will be expected to deliver the same service and understand the same laws and proceed the same way, then the training should be delivered consistently. So once the certification comes, will that then be the training everyone receives? And if that's the case, why aren't we now just modeling the training that the nationals already using? Could you speak to that a bit?
Yes, Serena Evans for the record. So I first just want to start with this, is that each community is extremely different, and so we don't want to monopolize training across the state. So what might be appropriate training for Clark County probably wouldn't be appropriate training for our Elko communities. And so we wanted to make sure, so in the amendment, there are these specific lists of topics that each training has to cover. And those are really what is the core advocacy. That was what you need to claim privilege with your clients. And so, there is differences between the 20 hours and 90 hours. And the programs that are doing 90 hours have the staffing to do so. They are much, much bigger organizations and serve a lot more unique, diverse clients. And so they often have more training on specifics of child trauma or working with LGBTQIA survivors, for example. And so some of our more rural programs don't have as diverse of clientele. Not to say that they shouldn't have those trainings, but because of staffing issues, it's just not realistic at this time. We don't want to have one training that is required for every program, just because each program is unique, and we hear routinely from victim survivors that one program might have not been a good fit for them, but another program was, just because of the differences in advocacy that they provide and different ways of handling things. And so there is uniqueness. There's beauty in the uniqueness of each program. And so what this bill is aiming to do is make sure that each program is meeting those basic requirements of victim advocacy, the core topics that are required to be a good victim advocate and claim privilege. I think as we start looking at professionalizing this and working, we might come across of standardizing of, yes, 40 hours is the standard. Here is a blanket training structure that you can build upon to meet the uniqueness of your own program. There was robust conversations of not wanting one entity to be the agency that provides all the training. So once we get the national certification, many programs will use that as a starting place, but then build upon in their own programs.
And if I could add to that real quickly, Teresa Benitez Thompson, Chief of Staff for Attorney General Ford. So in the conversations we were having as well around what training would mean, part of that was being begged by the question in some of the local jurisdictions coming from more defense challenges about, well, you're a victim's advocate, but what does that mean and what training have you had? So that question is starting to be asked more and more. So we want to be able to say by statute, these are how the folks are trained, and then have all of the service organizations and the coalition be able to push out that training in that manner. So that's one of the questions that's been asked. That's been driving the definition of what is that training, what is that training going to consist of?
And I think that's really my question too, that because this is currently happening, and is there a certificate or a credential that somebody has to verify that I've completed this, so I have the ability to receive this privilege? And if that's the case, if it's already happening, then whoever's doing the training has the ability to say, no, you're not certified because you've not completed this training. So
Yeah, so very good question. You're asking really big system questions that are part of the dialogue. And so Teresa Benitez Thompson, for the record, to Chair Miller, happy birthday. I feel so sheepish not having said that, let off with that. Happy birthday to you.
yeah, we have to open the hearings with that, but good.
Thank you. So in that conversation, we had conversations of, could we create a central repository? Would it be the Attorney General's office? Would it be the coalition? Would it be the courts? Who's going to certify? Who's going to file? And what we realized is we don't have answers for those yet. What we do need is we need the coalition to keep working through this committee to grow this and to grow it out, but we did not have consensus for how to stand that up at this juncture. And when you come into the certification process and what that means for the courts, you got to be, you really have to be serious about that. You've got to have that built up and set up and ready to go. So those are conversations that we're having. We know we need to spell out what the training is. We know we need to get all the service organizations, make this, part of the standard for what it means to be called a victim advocate. All of those other conversations, systemic ones that you're asking, are ones we are having too.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I would love to see it professionalized as well, even offered through our community colleges, a certificate program, something like that. But when it comes to the consistency, I appreciate geographical differences and community flexibility to adapt to our communities, but I also know that we don't provide separate training to our attorneys through our law schools. We don't provide separate trainings to our police officers through posts. We don't say, well, you're an Elko police officer, you're a Clark police officer. And so, again, I just would like to see some of that consistency. Attorney General?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron Ford, for the record. But what we do provide, Madam Chair, in the Attorney General, in the attorney realm, for example, is everyone gets a JD. There's a minimum standard that we learned about relative to what it takes to practice law, but some of us go get LLMs. Some of us go get specialties in other arenas as well, and we augment our understanding about the law based on our particular location. Water law in Nevada is very important. Not so important in Texas, where I come from, where you learn oil and gas law. And so there are specifics to specific regions in our state that require certain types of additional trainings. And I think that what we want to set here is the base level standard for a JD, so to speak, for a law degree. But allow other programs to augment their own teaching offerings to be sufficient for what a particular arena needs. And so, I think if a program has the ability to, for example, provide best practices in media training, then have them do that. That's great. But not everyone has the ability to train in the media arena. And so requiring them to do that may very well lead to a reduction in people. I think it was Assemblywoman Hanson who asked the question, a reduction of people actually even applying to be victims advocates, because now we require them to take a form of training that isn't even offered in their particular locale. So I think to the points you're making, they make very great points. And I've heard, sitting as chair of this committee, all of the differing offerings that our community members have. Again, the community members are people who come from law enforcement, from the judiciary, from prosecutions, from victim services, from healthcare organizations, from educational entities, and from domestic violence survivors. And they all have agreed that we need this at a very minimum to begin the standardization, and then we can continue to grow from there to add more professionalism to this particular arena.
Thank you. We have a follow-up from Vice Chair Marzola.
Good morning, and thank you for this bill. I used to work for Safe Nest 20 years ago. I used to be a case manager. And back then, the training was very extensive, from Metro to doctors to other advocates, things like that. So I'm glad that here we are 20 years later, we're now putting it in statute and making it official. So I appreciate that. How many victim advocates do we have in our state?
Serena Evans, for the record, I could not tell you off the top of my brain, but I'm happy to follow up offline once I can collect that from our database.
Okay, follow up. And so, thank you for that. And I just want to confirm, even though it's, not in statute, these trainings are still happening, correct?
Serena Evans, for the record, correct. And all of our programs that are offering training are meeting these requirements that we're defining in statute. So we're not creating a hurdle of like, hey, you're going to be non-compliant. We're just trying, again, standardize, professionalize, put it in statute so that there is proof. Let's say a victim advocate is subpoenaed to court and they are being questioned. They could be like, hey, here's what I have training in. And each program does keep track of the trainings that each victim advocate goes through. So there are certifications, there are pieces of paper saying how many hours they've completed and what topics. And so while it's not a formal procedure that is overseen by one entity, each program is overseen and certifying in their capacity.
Thank you again for bringing this bill in the presentation.
Thank you, Vice Chair. With that, we will go ahead and open it up for testimony. And so, again, everyone will have up to 2 minutes to provide their testimony, whether in support, opposition, or neutral. I'd like to give the phone number for anyone wishing to call in. The phone number is 1-669-900-6833, and today's meeting ID is 837-991-57006. So we will first begin with those here in Carson City that would like to provide testimony in support of Assembly Bill 48. Not seeing anyone here in Carson City. Is there anyone in Las Vegas? Not seeing anyone in Las Vegas broadcasting. Can you please open the line?
There are no callers to participate at this time.
Okay, thank you. Then I will go ahead and open up testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 48. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to testify? Not seeing anyone in Carson City. Is there anyone in Las Vegas? Not seeing anyone in Las Vegas. Is there anyone broadcasting, anyone on the line that would like to testify in opposition?
There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. I will open it up here in Carson City for anyone that would like to testify in neutral of AB 48. Not seeing anyone here in Carson City. Is there anyone here in Las Vegas or there in Las Vegas that would like to testify in neutral? Okay, broadcasting. Is there anyone on the line that would like to testify in neutral?
There are no callers at this time.
All right, thank you. So with that, I will welcome the Attorney General back up to the table. You have no closing remarks on this? Okay, thank you. With that, we will go ahead and then close the hearing on Assembly Bill 48, and we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 50, which is also coming from the Attorney General's office. Assembly Bill 50 revises provisions relating to the prosecution of certain crimes. And so with that, Attorney General, you're presenting? Yes, okay. Wait, we know we got to take care of our needs, so we'll give you a minute. And then just please proceed when you're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Again, Aaron Ford, for the record, your Attorney General. Great to see the members of the committee as well. I'm here today to testify on behalf of and present Assembly Bill 50, which discusses organized retail crime. Let's start with the basics. what is organized retail crime? To be sure, we're not talking about shoplifters who steal items for personal use. We are talking about organized retail crime, or organized retail theft, as you may hear it called, which refers to criminal activity in which perpetrators target retailers and retail stores to steal massive amounts of products and then resell the items in different venues, such as on the internet. NRS 205.08345 defines, quote, organized retail theft, unquote, as committing either alone or with any other person or persons a series of thefts of retail merchandise against one or more merchants, either on the premises of either on the premises or of a merchant or through the use of an internet or network site. The perpetrator's goal in these crimes is to either return the merchandise to the victimized retailer against their knowledge for value, or to resell, trade, or barter the merchandise for value. The merchandise items stolen include laundry detergent, designer handbags, allergy medicines, and razors, and many other things that you could imagine. The National Retail Federation stated in their 2021 Retail Security Survey that, and I quote, "Retailers report these gangs are more aggressive and violent than in years past." Some 65% of respondents noted the increase in violence, while 37% said organized retail crime gangs were much more aggressive than in the past, unquote. The study also names Las Vegas in their top 10 cities affected by organized retail crime. You'll be hearing more from retail stakeholders and law enforcement about what they're encountering in their day-to-day. But it has become obvious that more effort is needed to combat organized retail crime, and that the Office of Attorney General must be a part of the conversation on how we combat these crimes moving forward. Assembly Bill 50 seeks to provide the Office of Attorney General jurisdiction to investigate and prosecute organized retail crime, counterfeit goods, and fraudulent transactions. We also have submitted an amendment to establish within our office the Consumer Law Enforcement and Retail Coalition, or CLERC, as it will be called. CLERC is intended to serve as a bridge between retailers, law enforcement, and federal agencies that will allow us to work together to compile and review information, data, and evidence of organized retail crime occurring here in Nevada. Also, CLERC will aid us in developing additional leads and ideas in combating organized retail crime. CLERC will work with retailers and law enforcement to identify additional resources, including staffing and technological needs for combating organized retail crime. CLERC will also work with chambers of commerce, retailers, and local law enforcement to discuss and develop needed legislation to combat organized retail crime. Additionally, CLERC can assist in coordination between the Attorney General's office, Homeland Security investigations, and local law enforcement. We hear the need for this office to be more involved in the efforts to combat organized retail crime. While we will not be the quote-unquote boots on the ground force at the outset, we do plan to advocate for resources to ensure that we can be a meaningful partner. To that point, we consider the amendment from the Retail Association of Nevada, hopefully in Nellis, to be a friendly amendment. That concludes my testimony on this, except for me to say that this isn't just a Nevada-based conversation. I am in a coalition of attorneys general across the nation, and the Attorney General Alliance is what it's called, that has an organized retail crime working group that is dealing with this issue from coast to coast, from Maine to California. And in fact, in April, we'll be having another convening to discuss the national, indeed international trends that are arising in the organized retail crime arena. You've seen this on TV where folks on Rodale Drive had broken in an organized fashion and stole a whole bunch of very expensive items that only they can afford, because I can't, on Rodale Drive, and then utilized it to sell elsewhere. That was organized. You've seen internet organized retail crime where folks are now posting on some of the internet sites that I won't name right now to resell items that they have stolen from some of our big box stores, hardware, clothing, you name it. And so these are items that, again, the Retail Association of Nevada can be able to attest to, as well as our chambers of commerce. And we are looking forward to becoming more willing, more beneficial partners with them in combating organized retail crime. So thank you very much, ma'am. I'd like to invite the Chamber of Commerce and the Retail Association of Nevada to come forward with additional testimony, please.
Yes, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Brian Wachter with the Retail Association of Nevada. I want to thank the members of the Assembly Committee on Judiciary for the time this morning to speak with you. I also want to thank the Attorney General Ford for his leadership on this issue. This is something that his office and he himself through his task force of the Nationals have been working extensively in helping us to be able to combat. This is one of kind of the least discussed but fastest growing threats to workplace and consumer safety. We have incidences just recently in the last 4 months in North Las Vegas. One of our clerks was stabbed at a hardware store for interacting in the middle of one of these organized thefts. We thankfully haven't had any of our clerks die, although nationwide we have had several clerks in our stores die as a result of interacting with one of these organized retail threats. It's happening every day across the country, and we want to reiterate that this is not going after people who are stealing for need. In fact, the retailers and the retail industry have created diversionary courts, diversionary programs that really seek to help and identify people who are stealing for need to be able to get the resources that they need, get the help they need without creating a criminal background. Instead, we are talking very sophisticated units. They fund terrorism, they're funding gangs. It is connected through international trade. It's also interjurisdictional. Last year, we had a huge amount, close to $1 million in products stolen from California operatives, came into Reno, stole it, and then made their way back across the mountain. Without these types of resources and without the Attorney General's help, being able to coordinate that kind of activity is increasingly more difficult. There are 3 reasons why organized retail crime is really something that we need to be taking a look at. And the first, I mentioned briefly, is workplace safety. It is standard policy that retailers do not ask, nor do we want our clerks to engage in private security. We do not want them interacting with criminals who are there intent on stealing, but they end up in the middle of that anyway, both accidentally as well as sometimes voluntarily, and that is a huge workplace safety issue. The second of which is this does drive up the cost of goods. Those goods have to be replaced. More capital needs to be invested in stores to be able to address security. Security guards, as opposed to kind of the operations of retail, have to be brought in. And so there's a huge cost increase per store to be able to address this issue. And those, of course, are reflected in the cost of those goods. And then lastly, even counterfeit goods. The number one product that is stolen is actually baby formula. And if you don't store baby formula correctly, it can actually lead to the product itself becoming unusable or actually toxic for children. And so you get organized crime syndicates that come into our stores, they'll steal baby formula. The Attorney General mentioned razors. This is why when you walk into a store, you have maybe a display that causes a loud noise when you take a product off a shelf. You have to push a button to be able to get an associate to come open a case. All of those things get stolen, and then they're fenced online. So you have online marketplaces, Craigslist, and such, that people who are in distress are looking for deals, especially during the pandemic. People couldn't find the correct amount of product or the product they were looking for, and so they turned to these kind of alternate sites that are mostly filled with counterfeit goods. And so this is a huge consumer safety issue. There are federal actions that are taking place. You know, we want to thank Senator Catherine Cortez Masto for introducing the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act of 2023. That is something that is going to provide more resources to states like Nevada to be able to combat this, which is why AB 50 provides kind of the hub for Nevada's ORC actions with the Attorney General to be able to coordinate the activities of our local governments, provide that cross-jurisdictional support, and as well as utilize those federal resources that are coming into the state. We have looked over the last couple of years, and federal and local law enforcement have been increasing. But what we've significantly found is in your own neighborhoods, there are houses that are being used to store this kind of merchandise. You might have recently noticed in Las Vegas over $1 million in goods and products were taken out of a neighborhood just randomly. These are where they're hiding these types of items. It is going so far that Home Depot has actually spent and invested enough money that if you purchase their tools without going through a point of sale system at Home Depot, the tools will not work. And that is how extensive a problem this is. And so that is why we are presenting, and we're grateful that it is a friendly amendment, the amendment to Assembly Bill 50, which adds a Section 4, which would appropriate $1.5 million to clerk to be able to staff the Attorney General's office with the necessary resources to be able to handle this problem. And we would ask your permission to be able to bring that argument to Ways and Means. A lot of these products, millions and millions of dollars, are being diverted from our normal tax system, and so the state is actually losing tax money as a result of these thefts and the diversion onto online marketplaces. So the investment that we feel this amendment makes, the state will actually recuperate in additional revenue collected. And with that, I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Paul Moratkin with the Vegas Chamber. The Chamber would also like to thank the Attorney General and his team for the bill brought forward today with you and his collaboration, his leadership, working with the business community. I think AB 50 demonstrates the work that can be done when we focus on these issues on behalf of all Nevadans. The Chamber is in support of AB 50. We're also in support of the proposed amendment and the appropriation. So we think that's a significant signal from the Chamber. We believe it's an important investment in our community. We view this as first, as a public safety issue, and then an economic case, of course. And I think my colleague from the Retail Association has demonstrated that retail side of it. But from the Chamber perspective, it is a public safety issue. It doesn't matter what part of our community you're in, Las Vegas or in Washoe. It doesn't matter if it's the dollar store or a high-end retail store. The organized crime are impacting those consumers, those employees, and that's why we view this bill exceptionally important in this session to protect our employees, our families, and our community. And that's why we support the amendment and the work that's being done by the Attorney General's office, and we appreciate his leadership on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Chair, if I could just indicate that the amendment we do accept as friendly and would hope that ultimately it passes. But what we've requested through the bill, through our proposed amendment, is simply to receive jurisdiction, the ability to prosecute. We don't have a lot of resources to be able to prosecute, which is the reason why we accept this amendment as being friendly. But the clerk committee that will be set up will have 2 members representing Metro, 2 members representing district attorney's offices, 2 members representing other local law enforcement entities, 2 members representing chambers of commerce in Nevada, and 2 members representing a retailer association. This organization clerk, absent the money, shall serve as an interface to bridge contacts between retailers, law enforcement, and federal agencies to work together to compile and review information, data, and whatnot, as I've indicated in my earlier testimony. But I wanted to indicate that absent the additional funds, we will only be able to serve as a bridge organization at this juncture because of a lack of resources we have in our office. So we've requested jurisdiction in the event we ultimately get the resources, but wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, just a friendly reminder for everyone in the room that this is a policy committee, so we don't speak upon nor do we ask questions about funding or any appropriations. So any further comments, Attorney General, before we open it up for questions? Okay, thank you. With that, we will go ahead and open it up for questions. We will begin with Assemblywoman Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Can you share more about thank you, about what happens currently so we can understand the differences between now what is being proposed?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Mosca. The answer is there are one-off efforts. I mean, to be sure, our local law enforcement has jurisdiction to prosecute or to arrest, and our local DAs have the ability to prosecute crime, whether it's organized retail crime or otherwise. But we are seeing this, so if that's happening at the local level, to the extent they have the resources and the ability to be able to do that. But what we're seeing is that this isn't just, generally speaking, a localized issue. What's being stolen in Clark County is being put online and sold in Georgia. And so opportunities to work, and you know, we can keep it intrastate and talk about what's happening in Washoe being sold in Elko, right? And so the opportunity for the Office of Attorney General to be a central hub in working with law enforcement, district attorneys' offices, chambers of commerce, and retailers across the state provides us an opportunity to better address some of those issues.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this. My question goes to jurisdiction, which you touched on a little bit, but you're mentioning national or international organizations. Wouldn't that mean the FBI would be investigating or other agencies that deal with international crime?
Aaron Ford for the record. Thank you so much for the question. The answer is absolutely, which is one of the reasons why Senator Cortez Masto is running a bill at the federal level to address some of these issues. And so what we're running are parallel tracks trying to address this issue. It's a dynamic issue that requires a dynamic solution, and one in which the state of Nevada should be an integral part of. And so, yes, the international components might have international investigators involved in it, the national components to be sure as well. But there are opportunities to still work together, and this will provide my office the ability to be the central hub in Nevada that can coordinate with what's happening nationally and internationally as well.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like the bill and taking the jurisdiction, having the jurisdiction for this. My hesitation is the amendment. I'm wondering why we need to put something that ideally would be temporary into statute where it could be a task force over time, why it needs to be in statute, and why it doesn't include people who are familiar with the internet, IT people, people across state lines, FTC. I guess that's two questions, but I'm just wondering, my long-term worry is every time there is a spike in crime in different areas, I don't want to see new groups being put into statute for those future things.
Thank you so much, Aaron Ford, for the record. I could understand that concern. My office is on several task forces right now, some of which have been created outside of statute, some are created because of statute, the Technological Crimes Advisory Committee, the Committee on Domestic Violence. All of these things are created by statute because of particular issues that this body determines are specific and important enough to put it in the statute. And so we think that under the organized retail crime arena that we're seeing right now, the clerk committee is one that should be codified in the statute. To your question about why it doesn't include other folks, I'm open to that. I'm open to a catch-all that says, you know, and other representatives as the body sees fit or something along those lines, right? Because you're right, maybe we should have some internet folks on here to help us deal with that issue. But, you know, yeah, to be sure, I could set up a task force within my office that would have no resources, right? The clerk committee, the amendment, I know that you're not talking about money in this committee, but we do intend to, assuming this passes, and hopefully it does pass, have that conversation about money to allow the clerk committee to have resources to more than a task force would have that I would create to be able to effectuate more of an approach to addressing consumer this consumer protection issue or this consumer issue.
Thank you. Next question is from Assemblywoman Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm happy that you guys are addressing this issue, but I guess we've had more media on like San Francisco and Rodeo Drive. Those have been big issues, right? Like that makes the media. And so I'm curious about how pervasive it's been in this state and if we have an estimate on the loss in sales tax so that we can really conceptualize how big of an issue this is.
Thank you so much, Senatorwoman Aaron Ford, for the record. Yeah, we gave examples of what made the national news, but you heard an example of, and I try not to mention specific locales and big box stores, but a local big box hardware store that encountered actual violence through an organized retail crime group locally down in Southern Nevada. And so it's happening here, to be sure. It may not make the national news. Sometimes it makes our local news, but it is certainly happening. And it is something that I've heard enough from either the Retail Association or Chambers of Commerce or others that this office thinks that it should get engaged on that. Let me be clear. We have enough jurisdiction to last us a lifetime in my office. And so for me to come in and ask for additional jurisdiction should reveal the importance of this topic and the relevance that it has to what is happening here in this state. So let me offer the mic to my colleagues here to see if they have anything further to add.
Brian Wachter with the Retail Association of Nevada, and to you, through you, Madam Chair, to
Please go direct.
I appreciate that. Thank you, ma'am. To Assemblywoman Gallant, on average, certainly from one of our big box stores or from a national brand, there's about $1 million a year that will go lost per store in organized retail theft. And so we are looking somewhere along the lines of $50 to $100 million on average that could be diverted. And so the state would be looking at a significant loss of that sales tax to be about $20 million. I will get you exact figures. I certainly was not prepared for the money discussion here, but I'm happy to offline provide you with why we think this is an investment that the state will make its money back on.
And could you present that to the committee, please?
Absolutely.
Provide that. Thank you. Okay, next question from Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for being here and addressing this issue. I have a question, but a little background. So I'm glad we're talking about theft, and I have a huge, I think all of us do. It just is to me, it's at the bedrock of such a disrespect issue, absent need. You know, I think in our state, $950 you can steal, and really not a whole lot of ramifications. I had a son while he was working on his master's degree that was a manager of one of my favorite big box retailers, and the information that he shared was so disturbing, organized, and even just that $950 threshold. People are stealing. That's not need. You know, as raised by a single mom and eating pancakes for days on end and having our power shut off, I know what need is. But $950, I know that's what we're not talking about. But with organized retail, when we talk about this, I think you said Las Vegas was the top 10, one of the top 10 cities. Could we maybe get the list of what those other cities are? You might not have it with you today. If we could get that list of the other top 10 cities. And then do we see a rise? Like, what was the genesis, particularly in Nevada? Like, when did we start to see this organized retail crime take off? That if you would have that information, again, offline, I understand that. So thank you. Those are my questions for offline. Thank you for being here, and I hope we can continue to have conversations about theft, whether it's at the organized retail level or even in those lower levels, because it's, to me, a foundational issue that we need to address in our society and have ramifications. So thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely, Assemblywoman. So for the record, Paul Moratkin with the Vegas Chamber. So there definitely was a correlation with the pandemic where you saw more prevalent and more public awareness of this issue. Organized crime has been ongoing for decades, but you saw the more brazen attacks on employees, the more crash and grab and so forth. So you definitely saw that in the last 3 to 4 years, and so that's been where you see more highlights occurring in cities that the Attorney General referred to, but also in our community, though. You see more local reporting on those, and we can definitely follow up on some of those news articles for you that are Nevada-based, of course.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Saber Newby.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I don't expect that you have this information right now, but I would be curious as to, of the number of thefts, how many of those have charges filed, and of those charges filed, how many of those are prosecuted currently, so that we can get an idea of how many of those actually get through the process to prosecution, as we're talking about upping that level of prosecution. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Aaron Full for the record. Assemblywoman, I appreciate that question. I would have to work with our local partners on that. Currently, my office we don't operate with jurisdiction in this particular arena, so I wouldn't have that handy, but I can certainly reach out to some of our local law enforcement agencies and ask these questions, okay?
Madam Chair, if I might add as well, Brian Wachter with the Retail Association of Nevada. A lot of times, too, these cases can be very labor intensive and require tracking. I know at one point for an issue that we were having at Smith's down in Las Vegas, they actually started chopping up their pallets and putting tracking devices in the pallets because the pallets themselves were being stolen. And so we are doing the types of things that take months to be able to investigate and to be able to hand over. And so a lot of that is done in-house. And so when we get you those answers, it's going to be because a lot of times our law enforcement agencies don't have the amount of resources that it takes to actually have those long investigations, especially because you have to coordinate and you have to hit the accumulative amounts. And so we are, I think you're going to find that the number of prosecutions is low, and we're hoping that AB 50 is going to help change that.
Aaron Ford, for the record, real quickly. Assemblywoman, I also understand that Metro is here from Las Vegas and may very well, when they come up, be able to offer some insight on that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And if that's fine, I will call Metro up after the next question or so. Thank you. Assemblywoman Cohen has a question.
Thank you, Chair. AG, you referred to this as an intrastate hub, and that you made reference to having some other programs like this where your office acts as the intrastate hub. Can you give us some other examples and how those programs are working?
Yes, I'm trying to reflect back on the context of me saying that. But what I can say is that we work with other attorneys general, if that's what you're asking, across the state, across the nation on various issues.
Intra. Sorry, I didn't enunciate.
Absolutely, no, my apologies. So, a great example is the bill we just had. My office serves as I chair the Committee on Domestic Violence. It's an opportunity to bring folks from different arenas, from different parts of our state to come on a particular topic, to talk about things that we need to talk about, to have addressed at a statewide level. And then we can come to this body, for example, and disseminate it as purportedly on behalf of the entirety of a particular industry or particular activity. And comparably, we're asking that clerk be able to serve as a clearinghouse of sorts, of ideas on these issues, so that we can work in concert in order to improve the entirety of this situation across the state. But I also sit on several other committees, whether it relates to sexual assault, whether it relates to technological crimes, whether it relates to even I serve as chair of the Prosecutors Council. And that's a shorthand name there, but again, where we serve as an opportunity to come together as prosecutors throughout the state, talk about different issues, even present bills as prosecutors to this body. And so those are a handful of examples, and I'm happy to talk to you offline about others if you have more specific questions around that, but those are some examples I can provide off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Hardy.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, as we've talked about, people in their minds always find new ways to go around the legal system and find new ways to steal or whatever it is they're intent on doing. And so we have to address these things to try and deter that and to catch the people that are doing it. And so I appreciate this bill and the intent. And so you did mention other states. So could you just talk a little bit about the other states' attorneys general that have this jurisdiction, the ability to do longer investigations, and how is that working? Are they able to actually get some of these organized crime units and prosecute them? Because that's how I would hope this would work, that other states, maybe these groups are moving around, they'd be able to work together to catch them. Or if you could just talk about that in other states. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Hardy. Aaron Ford, for the record. Happy to talk about that. So the Attorney General Alliance is a bipartisan organization of attorneys general all throughout the state and our territory. So 56 attorneys general get together on frequent bases and talk about different issues. That organization created a bipartisan organized retail crime working group that is chaired in a bipartisan fashion, one by the Democratic Attorney General, my frat brother, Kwame Raoul in Illinois, and Republican Attorney General in Georgia, Chris Carr. They co-chair that, and they've held several working groups. My office is a part of the working group. We convened in Tennessee, I want to say it was maybe 3 or 4 months ago, to talk about what's happening across the country in this area. Illinois, Kwame Raoul was able to pass a bill that gives him not only jurisdiction but funds in order to be able to prosecute. I can get you more details on what his legislation looks like, but other states across the nation have likewise been able to go to their legislative bodies, ask for this type of jurisdiction, receive it, and then being able to work both intrastate, to Assemblywoman Cohen's question, but also interstate, you know what I mean, right, with everybody else, to address these issues as they occur across state lines, because they are occurring across state lines. So though I don't know if that's fully responsive to your question, but I do know of at least one that I can speak of specifically, and that's Illinois, that recently got this jurisdiction, and because he's one of the co-chairs of that organized retail working group that we have at the Attorney General Alliance.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. At this time, I would like to call Metro up, and Attorney General, maybe stay because.
Can I get some water?
Yes, please. Oh, look at that. 2 bottles. Thank you. This way, if there's questions that both of you can answer, because this way, if there's questions you both can answer, because I think right now members want to see the distinction between what's happening with Metro and what is being requested to happen through the jurisdiction, through the AG's office. So, members, questions? Let's go back to Assemblywoman Mosca. I think you were the one that first asked that first question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so my question was just what is happening currently so that we can understand the context of the proposed changes?
Director Beth Schmidt from Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, for the record. Thank you for allowing me to come forward and talk a little bit about, the Attorney General talked about they're not the boots on the ground. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department we are the boots on the ground in Southern Nevada. And I want to point out first that $850 million, that is the loss for last year for Nevada retailers. That's retail theft. $850 million. And that goes to the Assemblywoman's question about taxes. What's happening is that's being stolen. And then it's either being returned without a receipt and they're getting money for it, or it's being sold more often than not on online outlets, primarily Amazon. And one of the things I want to talk about is we lack the resources. We don't have enough people to help us combat this growing crime. We work very, very closely with Homeland Security investigations because many of these cases, they are international. So when we look at how do these cases come to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, our retailers work very, very closely with us. And what happens is they don't bring a case to us typically until they either have multiple cases of this particular crew of stealing, say from a big pharmacy store or from a home improvement store. They have it all on video. They have multiple cases of this. Or there is such a substantial loss from a few cases. So while you talk about what is the big picture, in 2021, we investigated 477 cases. That is the tip of the iceberg. Remember that our Nevada retailers are only bringing us the cases where they have a significant number of repeat offenses or a substantial loss. So 477 cases in 2021. 302 of those were either arrest or arrest warrant submitted on our part. Last year, it rose to 522 cases, with 349 either resulting in arrest or an arrest warrant submitted. The charges typically that we will use would be theft, burglary of a business, and participating in organized retail theft. I do want to say this, that we currently are a partner with a group that's called the Nevada Organized Retail Crime Association. This is made up of about approximately 500 retailers and law enforcement investigators. And because we don't have a statewide task force, that group has come together, and we have an online platform that we use to share information on these cases. So we are working together, but we don't have the resources, we don't have the people.
Thank you for that. We have a few more questions. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for hopping up with not a lot of notice for us. So my question is just similar to the one I asked previously to the Attorney General. Are you working with these other agencies like the FBI and other groups when these are crossing state lines? And how would shifting this jurisdiction to the AG's office assist your efforts in combating this?
Director Beth Schmidt for the record. Yes, as I mentioned, we work, our primary federal partner in Las Vegas on these crimes is Homeland Security Investigations. So that's who we use. They are the most appropriate one for us that we use them. And you ask, how would forming this task force help us? It would improve the synergy among the stakeholders. It would help us with providing joint jurisdiction and improving communication. All of those are critical, and if a financial component comes along with that, and we are able to add investigators at the local level, add the assistance of an Attorney General investigator, all of that will help us. Those numbers of how many of these crimes we are investigating, we would be able to address more of those.
If I could, Madam Chair, Aaron Ford for the record as well. Two responses. First of which, and I'm always cautious about talking about investigations and results just because, I don't want to mess up an investigation, but I do believe it's been in the headlines. A joint operation between my office, Metro, HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, and a few others, where there were a number of pharmacies down south in southern Nevada that were promulgating counterfeit pharmaceutical products. This was recent. I want to say in the last 6 months or so, probably more recent than that. And so we do work together quite a bit on things when we can do that. This presents us a more formalistic approach to be able to do that, which leads me to my second point. It isn't a shift in jurisdiction, though. It's an addition of jurisdiction. So I'm not replacing the jurisdiction that a local DA would have in prosecuting this, or a local law enforcement agency would have in investigating it. I'm getting concurrent jurisdiction in order to be able to assist or to do our own investigations and prosecutions as well. Yeah, I have my colleague here, Chief of Prosecutions, right here, Alyssa Engler.
Good morning. For the record, Alyssa Engler, Chief Deputy Attorney General in the Criminal Prosecution Division. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch, I made a note earlier when you were talking about prosecutions and the federal level. The prosecutions at the federal level usually have a threshold for dollar loss. So if we're talking about perhaps less than $1 million, but maybe $750,000 in loss, the feds are likely not going to take that as a prosecution, and so that falls on the state level. So while we do have partners with the feds and we work with joint task force and those types of things, the prosecution of what we would consider smaller dollar loss, but still large, falls on the state. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think maybe you've partially answered this, but I think I got a little bit confused. With the Metro, you were saying that you're already working with over 500 retail folks. And with this bill giving jurisdiction to the AG, would that just bring them into that? Or can something like this be scaled up? I'm just wondering if that already kind of exists and if that's working. Could that help? I don't know if you're thinking like retail gang units. And then I'm a little confused about Are you saying that there's two folks that need funding for more staff, two entities, or just the one entity? And that might not be proper to ask, so never mind, I'll ask that offline. Thank you.
If you, Teresa Benitez Thompson, Chief of Staff to Attorney General Ford, if you don't mind me starting with that answer, because I think the theme along that question around going to your last one, Assemblywoman Considine, about why the need for the clerk committee, like can the AG assemble a task force without legislation? I mean, ultimately we can, but one of the things that the clerk does and will do well that we're kind of replicating from like, for example, what we, other agreements that we have are, it's a place to catch resources, and then among all of the entities and the players in the state, decide how those resources go out. So we know that there's lots of conversations happening at the national level. You've heard a reference to Senator Cortez Masto's bill, where she is setting up an organized retail crime center at the federal level. That's still a work in progress, but there's that federal effort to say we need to find a better way to identify and work with states. And the question will be, what will be that entity at that state level that will be that one easily identifiable partner to go to find all of the conversation happening in the state. You heard Attorney General Ford talk about the Attorney General Alliance and those conversations that are happening out there. From the retailer side as well, they're talking about what other resources can be out there and how they can support. So we need a defined place to be able to, over time, accept these resources as they become available, and then have consensus among this group around where those resources are going to go. Is it going to be grants for more investigators down to Metro? Is it going to be grants for in our staffing capacity to grow it out? Is it going to be grants for more hardware and equipment in order to combat this? Is it an IT piece that's missing, right? So, or storage. So there's a lot of work to do out there, and we do need that centralized place to have that conversation. It's also going to be an easy, identifiable point to where's this conversation happening in the state. And then they can go, oh, that's in the AG's office and clerk, right? In the same way that when you say, you know, where's the conversation happening around trafficking, right? You don't want to have to go dig through every county and every city and every nonprofit to figure out where your stakeholders are. You want one easily identifiable group that by statute is having the conversation and organizing with public minutes, public testimony, and full transparency and daylight conversations and work around the problem. But I don't know if that answered your question in its entirety. That was a piece of it on the committee.
Yes, I guess it did answer, I guess, a portion of my question. I was just trying to, since Metro came up and they were talking about how they work together, if there's already relationships involved, especially with retail. And I know that Clark County is probably one of the biggest ones, as well as Washoe County. If those are already there, building upon those instead of creating a new thing. But you've answered a portion of that already. Thank you.
Director Beth Schmidt, for the record, what we have done out of necessities, we've come together with our retailers and our law enforcement in Southern Nevada to, it's more of an informal process that we've come together. We've kind of built this from the ground up. We are in support of formalizing this and running this through the Attorney General's office so that we can potentially grow this, improve the communication. What we're seeing is at that grassroots county level, this bringing stakeholders together in an informal process is very successful, and it's working. And we would like to grow that, and we need help to grow that.
Aaron Ford, for the record, I'd also like to remind the body that this isn't the first time you've heard a bill related to organized retail crime. 2 years ago, if you were here, your colleague, Dina Neal, brought a bill because the community was asking that the Attorney General's office get engaged and get involved in this particular arena for this exact purpose, to be a central focus, locus point for conversation around this and to organize individuals in this particular arena. We were unable to facilitate that 2 years ago. We've learned a way to do it going forward, and that's why we've presented it on my own behalf this go around.
Thank you. I also would like to ask a clarifying question. Director Schmidt, when you mentioned those statistics, were you specifically speaking of Las Vegas or for Nevada as a whole?
Director Beth Schmidt, for the record, the statistics of the cases we've investigated and our arrests,
Yes.
that's Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. That is one squad
And
of
those,
officers.
those dollar amounts as well would be
The
just.
dollar amount, the $850 million loss for Nevada retailers, that is for the state.
For the state.
And that was for last year.
Or last year, okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions, but I have a question, and this would be directed to the Attorney General. I understand what the intent of this and asking for the increased jurisdiction, but for me, it's really about, and we've talked about, terrorism and all this kind of stuff, and it makes it sound very large and fantastic. And when we think of organized crime, we think of, these huge, sophisticated networks and millions of dollars of theft, which in that case, absolutely, we need more resources and more collaboration. But according to existing law in the bill, we're talking about thefts of even less than $1,000. And so where will, if this happens, what will be that baseline or that trigger for that? Because clearly we don't want to be, and again, what's organized? We know what conspiracy is, but what's organized? There's no mayhem I've ever caused in my life that I didn't organize with someone, right? There's a plan. There's some kind of, hey, you and we gotta get this done, right? So, we've got 2 kids. Are they organized? $800 worth of shoes that's a different story. And before we heard a testimony about need-based theft, right? So who determines, I guess, once the arrest and everything, before we go into prosecution, we could decide if it's need-based. But again, what triggers this collaboration? Because organized, could we have like a specific definition of what organized would look like? And also, what would be for these felony thefts, the threshold? Because we're hearing $850 million, but yet I don't want people getting caught up, in $800 worth of stealing. So could we kind of get an idea of what we're really looking at?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Aaron Ford, for the record. I'm trying to find the statute. The statute defines organized retail theft already. And it's defined in, it looks like it's Section 1, Sub 6C. Organized retail theft means committing either alone or with any other person or persons a series of thefts of retail merchandise against one or more merchants, either on the premises of a merchant or through the use of the internet or network site in the state, with the intent to either return the merchandise to the merchant for value or resell, trade, or barter the merchandise for value in any manner, including without limitation through the use of an internet or network site. Now, I've read you the definition of what organized retail theft means. I believe you may be asking even further, what dollar amount are we talking about relative to what organized retail crime is going to be going after? And I think that likewise is spoken to, and I have my prosecutor here with me who can chime in as well, in Section 1, where it talks about the Section 1, Sub 1A. It talks about aggregated value of the property or services involved in all thefts committed in the organized retail theft in this state during a period of 120 days. Is at least $3,500, but less than $10,000. There's a minimum term set for that, and then there's a minimum term set for an amount that is more. That's 10,000 or more, with a minimum term set for that as well. So there are dollar figures set to delineate what the punishment is for organized retail theft as defined under the statute already.
But I'm asking for this collaboration or the clerk program. When do they jump in? And again, even by this definition, organized crime could include, if I'm at like a fair or a bazaar or something like that, each vendor would be considered their own individual business. So I steal a necklace from this vendor, walk 3 stands down, I grab something else. is this where clerk's going to jump in? And again, these are still smaller dollar amounts, but we've been talking about terrorism and all this big organized and interstate kind of stuff. So I'm asking, when does clerk jump in?
Well, even for the record, clerk, let me be clear, is not going to be performing the investigations and prosecutions. It is the clearinghouse or the meeting space for members of Metro, DAs, local enforcement agencies, chambers of commerce and retail associations to talk about these issues. And then the prosecutions will either take place at the AG's level through my prosecutions division, not clerk. Clerk is not going to be prosecuting. I want to be clear about that.
And you were, and I understand that, but when is clerk going to sit down and talk about it? Is clerk saying, oh, and today we've got, someone stole $4,000 from the store? When does clerk?
So, yeah, I'm trying to see if I can approach this. Clerk meets at least twice. We're meeting at least twice a year to talk about organized retail crime and our efforts among the state and ways in which we can combat it. I don't envision clerk sitting down determining that you have someone who stole $3,500 worth of stuff, and so who's finna go get it, right? That may very well come up in the conversation over, one of the two, but that is not the primary purpose of clerk. It's to serve again as the clearinghouse to talk about soliciting funds and accepting grants and resources that can go to elsewhere for the prosecutorial and investigative and prosecutorial components of organized retail crime. I do have my chief here. I don't know did you want to say anything on this? Oh, we're good. Okay.
I appreciate that too, because I don't think I heard that earlier, that it was, I understand it's to disseminate resources, but I didn't hear that you're planning to meet like twice a year. So it'd be a specific, okay.
Director Beth Schmidt, for the record.
Quarterly, I'm sorry. Aaron, for the record, I lied. Quarterly.
Thank you.
Yeah, we would continue to do the investigations, but the value of having a task force is that organized retail theft does not obey county boundaries and city line boundaries. And so the value for us currently right now, as we get together with the Nevada Organized Retail Crime Association, is we're talking about, hey, such and such retailer brought us this case. They've got $1 million loss. And all of a sudden we start hearing from another jurisdiction or another retailer sees the photos and says, hey, that's the same group that hit our stores. So what it does is it gives us that opportunity to come together. And as I said before, we were talking about that sort of joint jurisdiction, that maybe it's happening up in Reno, maybe it's happening in Washoe County, but those same folks, they don't obey county lines and city lines, that we also see them committing the crimes down south, because they will go wherever they can make the money. And so that's for us the value of bringing people together. We'll still continue with the majority of these cases of investigating them ourselves.
Thank you. And the ability, Alyssa Engler for the record, the ability of the Attorney General's office, because we're statewide prosecutors, we can prosecute in any jurisdiction within the state. So when we do have a situation where this organized retail theft is happening in multiple jurisdictions throughout the state, the Attorney General's office would potentially be the best prosecuting agency to handle that because of our jurisdictional ability.
Thank you so much for that. And with that, we just finished questions. With that, I'm going to open it up for testimony, okay? Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining Director Schmidt, kind of impromptu, thank you. With that, I will open it up for anyone who would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 50. Again, you will have up to 2 minutes. So inviting anyone here in Carson City that would like to begin.
Since I'm here. Thank you, Chair Miller, members of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. I am Director Beth Schmidt for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. We want to thank the Attorney General's office for bringing this bill forward. We support AB 50 and the Attorney General's amendment to create a task force. Now, I know I've spoken about many of the points that I wanted to make, but I want to talk about 2 specific things. What we see is we've seen an increase in stolen retail products that are being sold, or the term is fenced, under the guise of legitimate online businesses on Amazon and eBay. If you have shopped on either of those platforms, you probably have unknowingly been a victim, and I will explain why. In 2022, LBMPD executed search warrants at 2 large e-commerce fences, and at the time I was a supervisor in that unit and was involved. And we also had our partners, HSI was there. We also had numerous retailers there so that they could recover their property. First business that we served a warrant on had $4.7 million in sales of stolen merchandise during a 5-year period. In the second investigation, detectives recovered almost $2 million in stolen retail property from a residential home. Now, much of this stolen merchandise was over-the-counter products that require temperature controls that you would buy at a typical large pharmacy. Consumers were unknowingly purchasing these products, things like eye drops, allergy medicine, on Amazon, on eBay. Those products require temperature control. This was summer in Las Vegas. These products were being stolen. The people who were stealing it were being given drugs in return. The products were coming into the organized group, and they were stored, and then they were sold on online platforms.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy birthday. Good to see you. For the record, Trey Abney with the Abney Talcon Group here today, representing the over 2,000 Nevada members of NFIB, which is the National Federation of Independent Business. I will not belabor the point that was made, but I do want to thank my friend A.G. Ford for bringing this bill, and my friends at the Retail Association and Vegas Chamber for their hard work on this. You know, the average employee size of our members are about 4 to 8 employees. I do not represent the big box stores here, and you know, they don't have the sophisticated security systems that some of the big folks have. They can't get supplies or goods from the other store down the street. They can't send their customers to the other branch down the street when something else happens. And obviously this drives up the cost to all of our business owners and our employees. So again, I really appreciate the Attorney General. This is a very important issue to small businesses as well. And Madam Chair, I thank you for your time.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Jason Walker, Washington County Sheriff's Office, testifying in support of AB 50.
Good morning.
Thank you. Continue, please. Yes.
Good morning, Chair Miller, members of the committee. Greg Herrera, for the record, representing Nevada Sheriff and Chiefs Association. And I want to thank General Ford and his office for leading the charge on this. This brings a valuable resource, especially to the rurals that don't necessarily have the resources. And as a former member of the General Ford's high-tech task force crime, I know that this works. So we're in full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Mike Cathcart, representing the City of Henderson. The City of Henderson is in support of AB 50 and believe it will be an important partnership between the state and local jurisdictions to combat this growing crime. Thank you.
Not seeing anyone else here in Carson City, I'd like to open it up to testimony and support for anyone in Las Vegas that would like to testify. Not seeing anyone in Las Vegas. Broadcasting, can we open the lines, please?
Callers, if you would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 50, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, you are unmuted on our end. You may begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. John Lelu here on behalf of NAOP, testifying in support of AB 50. We would like to thank Attorney General Ford for bringing this important measure to your attention, and we would urge your support. I would just ditto everything that has been said so far. Thank you.
There are no other callers to participate at this time.
Thank you for that. I will go ahead and close support testimony and open it up for testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 50. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to testify? Not seeing anyone approach, is there anyone in Las Vegas who would like to testify? Also not seeing anyone approach. Broadcasting, is there anyone on the line that would like to testify in opposition?
Chair, there are no other callers at this time.
Thank you. Anyone interested in testifying in neutral here in Carson City for Assembly Bill 50? Not seeing anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas? Also not seeing anyone. Broadcasting, is there anyone on the line for neutral?
Callers, if you'd like to testify in neutral for Assembly Bill 50, please press star 9 now.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cyrus, C-Y-R-U-S. While there are some good actions to the bill, I just would wish that the Attorney General would clarify exactly why these increasing thefts that's actually happening. When he pointed out to the state of California, the reason why it's happening there and it's crossing state lines is because the state of California has released a lot of prisoners. There's also Proposition 47, which decriminalizes retail theft, and that may encourage a lot of people to come here to do so. Now, one of the other things is that he's talking about an increase in retail theft, and a lot of this has been a result of the anti-police sentiment, where many cities have chosen to reduce their police funding, and many of them, not to mention, many officers have decided to leave the force. In fact, in many cities, there are shortages of police officers, and when you see that, you are likely to see an increase in crime. In addition to that, we saw the effect
Caller,
of the
can I
lockdown,
ask, caller,
and
caller, are you testifying in neutral of the
Yes.
bill? Okay, so if we could keep it specific to the policy that was presented?
Yeah. I just would wish that that the people who are supporting this bill would understand that the supply chain issues and other factors are responsible for this bill, because it's one thing that we can address the issue, but we're not addressing the root causes of the problem. And and not to mention the inflation that is caused by the supply chain issue. Other than that, I will yield my time.
Thank you. Broadcasting, is there anyone else on the line?
Chair, there are no other callers to testify at this time.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that, Attorney General, would you like to make some final remarks? No. Thank you. So with that, I will go ahead and close the hearing on Assembly Bill 50. We will open the hearing for our last bill on Assembly Bill 159. This revises provisions relating to cruelty to animals. And we have Minority Leader O'Neill and District Attorney Noble presenting together. So we'll give you a few minutes to settle in, and whenever you are ready, please proceed. I'm going to let Attorney General know you're the one lowering the chair.
It's broken.
Oh, is it? Okay, we will deal with that as well. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Miller and members of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. I'm happy to be back with you. This was actually one of my favorite committees in the last couple sessions before I got shifted over to Ways and Means, which is nowhere near as stimulating at times, may I say. I'm Assemblyman PK.
Minority Leader, you know you're on the record with that, right? Continue.
I have my attorney with me. She's telling me not to talk. I'm Assemblyman P.K. O'Neill, representing Assembly District 40, which encompasses all of Carson City, all of Story County, and the eastern side of Washoe County, up to the city of Sparks. I'm here today to introduce to you Assembly Bill 159. The impetus of this bill is the case of Jason Brown. In 2014, Brown tortured and killed small dogs from a list that he attained or bought from Craigslist at a motel in Reno, Nevada. I will spare you some of the details, but one of the most disturbing cases of animal abuse this is probably one of the most disturbing cases of animal abuse ever encountered in Nevada. In 2015, Brown was convicted of 7 counts of torturing and/or killing an animal and sentenced to a minimum aggregate term of 11 years in prison. In 2022, Brown was already up for early parole because his crimes are classified as a non-violent under our current statute. AB 159 seeks to change the classification of animal torture, killing, or mutilation from a non-violent offense to a crime of violence for the purpose of early parole eligibility. With me today to assist in presenting this bill is Jennifer Noble, Chief Deputy District Attorney in the Washoe County DA's office. And I'll ask now and turn it over to Ms. Noble. Thank you, Chair.
Good morning, Chair Miller and members of the committee. Chief Deputy District Attorney Jennifer Noble, representing the Nevada District Attorneys Association. I want to start by acknowledging that this is a crime. This type of crime is undoubtedly underreported because, of course, animals have no voice. They have no way to seek help when they're being abused. They are at our mercy, quite frankly, and no matter how our current statute reads, the malicious torture, maiming, mutilation of an animal is an act of violence. Many of the most infamous serial killers have a history of stark animal abuse. And past animal abuse is such a strong indicator of future violent behavior that the FBI uses it as a predictor when profiling particularly dangerous and violent criminals. Studies have shown that people who severely abuse animals are likely to harm human beings. For example, there is a strong correlation between abuse of animals and the cycle of domestic violence. Companion animals can be a source of comfort to victims of domestic abuse, but abusers often exploit and manipulate, control, and punish victims by hurting their animals. All that said, I want to make clear to this committee that this bill does not increase the penalty for this crime. Under current law, offenders can earn credits to reduce their minimum sentence and make them eligible for parole sooner. And our current statutes carve out a subset of offenders who are not eligible for these early release credits. Right now, that subset consists of felony sexual offenses, crimes of violence, Category A or B felonies like sexual assault, murder, attempted murder, high-level drug possession, and felony DUIs. Section 1, page 3 of the bill provides that the willful and malicious killing, torture, or mutilation of an animal will be added to the list of offenses not eligible for early release credits, along with the current subset of offenders I just mentioned. Section 2, page 5 of the bill would make persons who commit this crime ineligible for diversion and the automatic sealing that comes with it. Section 3, page 6 adds the willful and malicious torture, killing, or mutilation of an animal to the list of offenses that are not eligible for early termination of probation in the context of a specialty court setting. Now, I want to make clear that this is not simply the torture, maiming, or mutilation or killing of an animal that we're talking about. We're specifically talking about subsection 6 of NRS 574.100. We have to prove not only did they do that, but it was with evil intent, wish, or design. That's the definition of maliciousness under our current statute. Section 4 of the bill removes the division's mandatory obligation to seek early release of these offenders. I'd like to emphasize again, we're not increasing penalties here. They are still eligible for probation. It is a Category B felony, but when they are sentenced to prison or they're revoked, it prevents them from being released prior to the minimum end of their sentence. And the reason that we wanted to get them out of the diversion statutes is because diversion comes with automatic sealing. They can still take advantage of specialty courts as a condition of probation. But the current automatic sealing options means people like Jason Brown could get out of prison and work with vulnerable populations like the elderly, children, people who experience developmental delays, or animals. And there wouldn't be any way for an employer to know or find out that they have this offense in their history. When someone willfully and maliciously kills, mutilates, or tortures an animal, our statutes should recognize the seriousness of that crime for purposes of early parole, probation, and sealing, and that's what we're seeking to do with AB 159. I appreciate this committee's time, and with that, I am happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Noble. And thank you for clarifying what was certainly going to be a question about increasing the penalties on that. Members, do we have any questions? I don't think we have any questions. Again, thank you for clarifying what certainly was about to be a question, so thank you for that. With that, I will go ahead and open it up for testimony. So those who would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 159, you will have up to 2 minutes. Let's start here in Carson City.
Chair Miller and members of the committee, my name is Director Beth Schmidt, BETH-SCHMIDT, representing the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. While these animal cruelty crimes are investigated by city and county animal control in our jurisdiction, the LVMPD supports this measure as it strengthens penalties for animal cruelty crimes, which can be a positive aspect of trying to deter this crime.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Jason Walker, Washington County Sheriff's Office, testifying in support of this Assembly bill. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Miller, members of the committee. Greg Herrera, for the record, are our partners representing Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association, and I want to thank Assemblyman O'Neill and Chief Deputy Noble for bringing this forward. Great presentation, and we stand in full support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Mike Cathcart, representing the City of Henderson. City of Henderson is in support of AB 159 and believe this is appropriate public policy, and want to thank the sponsor and Ms. Noble for all their work on this issue.
Chair and committee members, for the record, my name is Andrew Lee Pilbit. I am the state chairman of the United Veterans Legislative Council, maybe the last person you'd think would be in this hearing. However, resources are being consumed because there isn't a high enough penalty for these activities. And the resources in our community end up taking away dollars from our veterans, believe it or not. It costs $1,000 to $1,500 to train each of these veteran dogs. So we're in favor of this highly. It's a direct impact on our veterans. And when you think some of our veterans, especially our Guard, have been deployed as many as 8 times, and we want them to be normal, we need these dollars to create more service dogs for our veterans. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in Carson City that would like to testify in support? Not seeing anyone else. Is there anyone in Las Vegas that would like to testify in support? Not seeing anyone in Las Vegas broadcasting, please open the lines.
Callers, if you would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 159, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 159, please press star 9 now. Caller, please press star 6 to unmute your phone. You may begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name for the record is Rebecca Goff, R-E-B-E, C as in cat, C as in cat A, G as in girl, O, F as in Frank, F as in Frank, and I'm the Nevada State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. The Humane Society of the United States supports AB 159, which would add animal torture to the list of offenses that are not eligible for a reduction in sentence. Crimes against animals must be taken seriously. They are really crimes against society. The relationship between harm to animals and harm to others is well established. Because of this connection between human violence and animal cruelty, the FBI began collecting data on animal cruelty crimes through its National Incident-Based Reporting System in 2016. Torture is tracked and classified as a crime against society, the same category as rape and murder. Animal cruelty can range from unintentional neglect to premeditated violence. The latter can be a predicator of harm to the most vulnerable, children, intimate partners, and elders. Studies from the United States Secret Service links animal abuse to mass attacks in public spaces. Most animal crimes do not receive sentences that include incarceration. So when they do, it typically involves the most heinous acts, or the defendants are habitual offenders. I appreciate the committee's attention to protecting the most vulnerable in our state, including our animals, and respectfully ask that you support AB 159. Thank you for your time.
Chair, there are no other callers to testify at this time.
Thank you, Broadcasting. I'd like to open it up for testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 159. If there's anyone here in Carson City, please proceed. Not seeing anyone here in Carson City. Is there anyone in Las Vegas? There's no one in Las Vegas. Broadcasting, is there anyone on the line to testify in opposition?
Chair, there are no other callers at this time.
Thank you. I will open it up for testimony in neutral of Assembly Bill 159. Is there anyone here in Carson City? Is there anyone in Las Vegas who would like to testify in neutral? Not seeing anyone. Broadcasting, is there anyone on the lines that would like to testify in neutral?
Chair, there are no other callers to testify at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. Then I will close testimony and welcome our bill presenters back up for any final comments. They have no final comments. No questions, no comments. Exemplary bill presentation. So thank you with that. With that, I will go ahead and close the hearing on Assembly Bill 159. The last item on our agenda is public comment. So again, everyone will have up to 2 minutes to make public comment. We ask that you not comment on bills that we just had hearings on, but anything else that's under the purview of the Judiciary Committee. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to make public comment? Is there anyone in Las Vegas that would like to make public comment? Not seeing anyone. Broadcasting, please open the lines.
Chair, the public line is open and working. There are no other callers to participate at this time.
Thank you. With that, then I will go ahead and close public comment. Just would like to remind everyone that we have a training in the morning at 8 a.m. So Judiciary Committee will begin at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Okay? So see y'all at 9 a.m. Thank you. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.